Hello, Mr. Banjanak here, and I'm going to be giving our first digital book talk of the school year. The book that I'm going to be talking about is called Swamp Thing. It's by a guy named Alan Moore, who, if you're really into comic books, you will notice whose name you'll recognize from things like Watchmen and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and V for Vendetta, some of those like really famous, like kind of really big comics. So this is called Swamp Thing. It's from like the 80s or 90s. It was when it was running somewhere in that time. It is about a guy named Alec who does that really stereotypical scientist thing of being a mad scientist and falling into a vat of radioactive waste in a swamp, and then emerging as this thing called the Swamp Thing. He's like really mossy, and he's giant, and he's super powerful, but he's also like hyper articulate, and he's really good at talking, and he's really good about talking about his philosophy, and like kind of like the importance of conserving the earth. This is a horror graphic novel, which means that it's like really scary. So if you're not into horror and monsters and getting freaked out by that stuff, this is not a book that I would necessarily recommend for you. However, if you dig comic books and if you dig science fiction and horror, this would be a really good one to dive into. I think the artwork is really beautiful. You can see some of it here, just kind of flipping through. Some pictures to show you. You can see some of the artwork. It looks a little bit old-fashioned, but I think that's part of the point. I think it's supposed to invoke some of those like really old kind of horror comics, some of those old you might even say cheesy sort of comics and ideas. I do want to read you a really quick excerpt just to show a little bit of the tone of the story and kind of what you're getting into. I mentioned that Swamp Thing, he's really articulate and he's really philosophical. So this is a passage where he's being pursued by the military. Everybody's out to get him, and he's kind of thinking about this exchange that he had with the beetle. So while he's getting fired at, he says, "This morning I watched a beetle that had gotten itself in trouble with some ants. First there was just the beetle, then there was just a beetle-shaped pile of ants. The beetle was bigger and stronger and more clever, but I guess there were just too many ants. There's fire behind me. There's light all around me. I'm heading south, but there are too many ants, and there aren't enough shadows, and no matter how many of them I take out, no matter how hard I run, they just keep coming. I think they're going to get me this time. I think they finally ran out of room for monsters." Show like another picture from that right here. It's a really neat book. Another thing that I really liked and appreciated about it was that it has a really conservationist bent. It's really interested in and concerned about how we treat the environment, which I think is just an awesome lens for a comic book to take. If you're interested in checking this one out, please feel free to borrow it from me. Just let me know if you want to read it. I hope that you're interested in this book. I hope that you're excited about it. And I really just can't wait to see what books you're going to recommend to me and to the rest of the class. If you have any questions about it, please feel free to email me. Otherwise, have a really great rest of your day. Thanks.